Let's watch a video real quick.
48 hours ago, it looked like peace might be on the cards in Iran. US President Donald Trump.
One thing I feel about my life is I don't trust anything anymore. I don't care what Trump says. I don't care what the media says. No one knows what will happen in Iran next. It's all a scam. It's all blah blah. It's all making money. It's hard for me to watch news nowadays because it doesn't matter. Trump's opinion will change within 2 hours.
Trump, who previously insisted on Iran's unconditional surrender, had what appeared to be a sudden change of heart, announcing a 5-day pause on US strikes against Iranian energy infrastructure after what he described as very good and productive conversations between the US and Iran. Unfortunately, the mood music has since changed. Iran has denied that any negotiations with the US have taken place, and there's now quite a lot of evidence, including a massive troop buildup, that the US is prepping for some sort of ground invasion. So, in this video, we're going to explain why a ground invasion suddenly looks worryingly inevitable, and what it might actually involve.
With all the respect to people in the army, man, but imagine you stand there. What do you go for war for? You're gonna put your life in danger for Trump and his rich phonies to make more oil money? That was just like the other wars, though, right? What are you really dying for? You're not dying on Omaha Beach trying to fight the Nazis. You're literally dying so Epstein doesn't get exposed.
Suddenly looks worryingly inevitable, and what it might actually involve.
Oh, fried fish.
Epstein was ranked 13th in our list of the world's most influential people. So in the latest edition of our magazine Too Long, we explain how Epstein remained so influential more than 6 years after his death, and the seemingly endless revelations that continue to raise issues for the powerful people who were once in his orbit. That's just one of 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect.
Not true, I disagree. There's two types of wars. There's war that's morally okay, and there's war that's stupid. When a Ukrainian soldier defends his home against a Russian, that's a very different war than an American going into Iraq for a puppet installed by the CIA and the fake reason of weapons of mass destruction. That is very different.
Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. So, let's get straight into it. As we see it, there are 3 things that suggest a US ground invasion is now pretty much inevitable. The first and most obvious sign is the ongoing deployment of ground troops to the region, specifically to US bases in Israel and Jordan. The New York Times reported on Monday, for instance, that senior military officials in the US were considering deploying the Immediate Response Force from the Army's 82nd Airborne Division, a brigade of around 3,000 soldiers capable of deploying anywhere in the world within 18 hours. This was then essentially confirmed by Fox News on Tuesday, who reported that the so-called command element of the 82nd had been asked to deploy.
Why have I not received the Nobel Peace Prize? Thank you, FIFA, for giving me the Peace Prize. I have stopped 42 wars already, 43 and counting. I'm stopping all these wars.
To the Middle East, the first step in a wider deployment. The same day, the Wall Street Journal reported that something like 2,200 US Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, as well as a number of amphibious assault vehicles, including the USS Tripoli and USS New Orleans, were moving towards the Middle East, and are due to arrive on Friday, the same day that Trump's latest Iran deadline expires. This came a few hours after a Jerusalem Post report claimed that, on top of the 82nd Airborne and these Marines, the US was deploying an additional 2,000 sailors to the region. Analysis of open source data also suggests there have been something like 45 transport flights from bases in the continental US to bases in Israel and Jordan since March the 12th. No one knows exactly which units or how many troops were transported in these flights, but lots of these flights came from US bases that house elite units, so it seems like a pretty safe bet to assume that they were carrying more special forces to accompany the units mentioned a second ago. By the time this video comes out, there'll probably have been even more reports of other units deploying to the area, given current trends. Now, it's worth stressing that this deployment is nowhere near big enough for a full-scale ground invasion, which would probably require months of troop buildup, like we saw before Putin's invasion of Ukraine. However, it's also worth stressing that this does look like a pretty sizable contingent of special forces, and while it's possible that this is just a show of force intended to squeeze concessions out of the Iranians, recent history suggests that Trump generally doesn't deploy troops if he isn't planning on using them. So, this ongoing troop buildup is the first and most obvious sign. The second, slightly more subtle sign is the fact that the Trump administration is still asking Congress for an additional $200 billion to fund the war.
I thought you have 1.5 trillion into defense next year, and you still need 200 billion more. It's all a scam, chat. They're not hiding anymore. You barely can pay your rent. You barely have a good minimum wage. But they have billions and billions and billions for rocketing into fucking girls' schools, bro. It's the biggest fucking scam ever run. And everyone's cheering.
Even in the context of America's absolutely enormous military budget, this is a pretty big number. Last year, US defense spending came in at just under $1 trillion, which means an additional $200 billion would imply something like a 20% annual increase. Given the evident political risks involved in asking American taxpayers for hundreds of billions of dollars to fund a quagmire-shaped war in the Middle East, this is the sort of sum the Trump administration would only request if they really needed it. And the only reason we can see for that is that they're preparing for a costly ground invasion that might take some time. It's also telling that, when asked why he still wanted the money, given his apparent optimism about negotiations, Trump couldn't really come up with a good answer.
If the war is ending, do you still need $200 billion?
It's always nice to have. It's always nice to have.
The third and final piece of evidence we have suggesting a ground invasion is on the cards is that there have been a handful of reports suggesting, while Trump
I think what they mean with ground invasion is taking that island and stuff. They're not gonna like go in the streets of Tehran.
has been publicly talking up the prospect of a deal, US military officials have, at the same time, quietly been telling their Israeli counterparts to prepare for a longer war. Late on Monday, for instance, a Ynet journalist claimed that Israeli officials had been signalled by the US to prepare for at least another 2 weeks of war. While it's only circumstantial evidence, this would be consistent with the thesis that all Trump's recent talk of peace is essentially a smokescreen to distract the Iranians while the US gets ready for a ground invasion. To be honest, even if Trump is negotiating in good faith, it's still hard to see a deal happening anytime soon, given the unbridgeably massive gulf between the two sides' negotiating positions. According to
Have we learned nothing from Afghanistan and Iraq? That it was really dumb to go there? That it was... Back in the day when people had to step back, there was a German president called Wolfgang Köhler who said, we are fighting economical wars in the Caucasus. And for that, he had to, he was fired by Angela Merkel. Back in the day, man. You had to step back for that, right?
a recent report by
This is a war for rich people to get richer.
the Times of Israel, for instance, Trump has apparently issued a 15-point proposal to Iran.
You have to always ask yourself, who benefits from this? Whose investments grow from this war?
Which would require Iran to dismantle its nuclear program, give up on its proxy network, fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and accept limits on its ballistic missile program, all in exchange for sanctions relief. It's hard to...
That's misquoted and wrong. Am I miss... Let's see if that viewer is a retard. What did he say? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, how do I find it right now, man? Oh, because of one non-sub, I have to look for stuff now. You know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. I'm right, you're wrong. I don't have time for this right now. Shekel Stringer?
Imagine Iran agreeing to this at the moment, given that, according to a recent report by the Wall Street Journal, Iran is currently offering zero concessions, while demanding not only sanctions relief, but also the closure of all US military bases in the Persian Gulf, reparations for war-related damage, some sort of security guarantee to guard against future aggression, and a new order for the Strait of Hormuz that would allow Iran to collect tolls from ships transiting through, much like Egypt
Shekel
does.
is right. What does Shekel say? Some Israel propaganda? What is Shekel saying? Iran is not like Afghanistan or Iraq. You always talk about how stupid the West was for being reactive to Russia's moves, but then when proactive action is taken against the ally in the Middle East, you call it retarded though. Yeah, clearly, because you need to see the truth of what Trump is doing there. 1.5 trillion is moving right before the announcement. This is all for his rich friends. They're making a shit of money on the side. Don't act like this is our project. We're killing evil. We're destroying evil, man. The whole world is evil. Why do we sit on this big chair that Israel and US are the fucking greatest, man? Look at what Israel did in Gaza, man. Fucking genocide. Look at the US, man. Iraq without any fucking real war goals. Oh, Afghanistan, good job. Guantanamo Bay. Whatever the fuck's going on. We're always act like we're the greatest ever. I'm not saying Iran is perfect, but this fucking notion, oh, big evil Iran, we're the fucking heroes, man. Yeah. 200 billion more. Yeah. Come on, bro. How much propaganda you need to have to be like, yeah, I want to die for these rich people. Let's go.
Suez Canal.
Ridiculous.
So you get the idea. A deal isn't forthcoming, and the US looks like it's preparing for a ground invasion. So what would this actually look like? Well, again, the key thing to understand here is that the current troop buildup isn't big enough for a full-on invasion, and its focus on special ops suggests they're planning something more targeted. The most obvious...
Always this acting, well, we're Israel, Iran is the evil man. Your fucking president literally put a note into every soldier in the beginning of the war to kill every woman and child, man.
Probably
what
Karg
the fuck?
Island, which is something Trump has apparently been flirting with since literally the 80s, and which the US military hit earlier this month.
But whoa,
for context,
we're so
Karg
much
is
fucking
essentially
morally
an oil
above
terminal
Iran.
sitting roughly 15
man.
kilometers off the Iranian mainland that processes something like 90% of Iran's oil exports. The plan here would presumably be...
Wrong. We saw it. I showed it on stream. We had the UN thing on stream. Wrong.
To seize the island and then use it to assert control over Iran's oil exports, much like in Venezuela. If this is the plan, however, it's far from foolproof. For starters, Iran has other terminals available, including the Lavan, Siri, and Qeshm Islands in the Persian Gulf, and the Jask terminal on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, which probably have enough capacity to fund Iran's war efforts. But more importantly, even if the US were to seize all of these, and this would be a very tall order, it's hard to imagine Iran just letting the US control its oil exports. And if they were to refuse, global oil prices would skyrocket, and US special forces would be left trying to indefinitely defend precariously exposed positions inside Iranian territory. As we mentioned earlier, the latest edition of our magazine, Too Long, is out now, which...
But if I have to every time reproof stuff we looked at for every retarded chat, we're gonna be here all day. Check literally the report of the UN and these 5 lawyers that are a bit better educated than you and me. Thank you, TommyKay. Put your opinion in chat. Let's hear it.
She slipped through my fingers like sand. Heard that she had a man. Now I'm just sitting here sad. Oh well, ship sail. She slipped through my fingers like sand.